Paul Duggan here talking about what can only be called performance management madness. There's a news item in the CNN, etc., which is about the Wells Fargo Bank, and they've just been hit with some penalties. But really what's behind this story is that they introduced, as I understand it from the news media, they introduced a performance management system. Now, they wanted to upsell clients. So clients had a couple of accounts and they wanted clients to have more accounts, common strategy in business. So what they did was they thought, well, let's incentivize our workers to get additional accounts for customers. And not necessarily a bad idea in itself. But what they ran up against was the problem which is identified in the outcomes theory principle about using indicators as incentives. If you use an indicator as an incentive, then you've got to be sure that people can't game that indicator, because otherwise they will tend to game the indicator. Okay, so what happened was they introduced this incentive to their staff. If you get our customers to have more accounts, we'll upsell them, we'll make more profit. And apparently the bank was getting all sorts of awards for what it was doing. The only problem was that some of the staff anyway were just making up these new accounts for customers. So it now transpires that maybe something like over 1.5 million new false accounts had been created for customers. And Wells Fargo has just fired about 5,000 workers for doing this. So what you've got there is a great example of really performance management gone wild, where you think it's a good idea to incentivize the outcome you're trying to achieve, but you haven't risk managed around the manipulability, the ability to game that indicator. And so you get this kind of road crash, which we're seeing in regard to Wells Fargo. Reasonably common kind of occurrence where people don't take into account that outcomes theory principle about if you're going to use an indicator for incentivization, you better be really sure that it can't be gamed. So you've got to bring to bear some risk management around that. And maybe in some cases, indicators are so easily gamed that they're not useful for using as a performance incentive. So, and you get a particular problem where if you're in an organization where the people at the top are actually rewarded for people at the bottom producing these really quite remarkable results around an indicator, you see there's very little incentive for people at the top to actually really get to the bottom of whether these positive performance is actually positive performance or people gaming the indicator. So in those cases, if you really wanted to use that indicator, you'd have to introduce an outside element to try and keep it honest. And some indicators are just so easy to rule. I don't know anything about opening bank accounts for customers. I don't know whether it's easy to monitor or whatever, but it's really great. But if you were going to do that, you would have to have someone monitoring that to make sure that it's keeping the indicator honest, because there's a real incentive to game or rort performance indicators. And so that's a great illustration of performance management madness out there in the field. That's 3-minute outcomes. There's a little bit of information about this up on the URL. And if you want the URL in regard to the whole series, check it out up here. Thank you very much.